Can propaganda outlive the governments that created it? When the Soviet Union dissolved in December 1991, it left behind millions of classified files, a shattered empire, and something harder to account for: the ideas it had planted across decades of covert influence work. Some of those ideas did not disappear with the state that manufactured them. They adapted, traveled, and found new hosts. Today, we examine one chapter of that story: Operation SIG, a Soviet intelligence effort that, according to historians, defectors, and intelligence researchers, sought to systematically reshape how the world understood Zionism. It is a story about the architecture of propaganda, the patience of long-term influence campaigns, and why the past has never been more relevant. The Cold War was never simply a contest of armies or nuclear arsenals. At its core, it was a battle for narrative. From the end of World War II through the early 1990s, the United States and the Soviet Union competed for global influence, through alliances and economic aid, yes, but also through ideas. Each superpower invested enormous resources in what we might today call the information war. The Soviet side had a name for this: active measures. The Russian term aktivnaya meropryatiya covered a wide range of covert operations designed to influence political opinion, destabilize governments, and advance Soviet foreign policy without conventional military means. These were not improvised efforts. The KGB, the Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti, maintained dedicated departments for the craft of disinformation. Active measures included the forgery of official documents, the funding of front organizations, the cultivation of sympathetic voices in academia and journalism, and the systematic amplification of false narratives. Unlike conventional espionage, which sought to steal secrets, active measures sought to plant them, to construct alternative realities that served Soviet interests and undermined the West's. It was within this framework, patient, professional, and deeply institutionalized, that Operation SIG was conceived. Operation SIG, derived from the Russian phrase meaning Zionist foreign agents, was, according to multiple researchers and former intelligence officials, a coordinated Soviet disinformation campaign targeting international perceptions of Zionism and the State of Israel. The most detailed public account comes from Ion Mihai Pacepa, a Romanian general who served as deputy chief of Romanian foreign intelligence before defecting to the United States in 1978. Pacepa is one of the highest-ranking intelligence officers ever to defect to the West, and in his accounts, including the 2013 book Disinformation, co-authored with legal scholar Ronald Richlock, he described a campaign coordinated between the KGB and allied Eastern Bloc intelligence services. According to Pacepa, Operation SIG was designed to export anti-Semitic ideas under the politically neutral banner of Anti-Zionism. The strategic goal? Reframe Zionism not as the national self-determination movement of the Jewish people, but as a form of racism, colonialism, and international conspiracy. A successful operation would isolate Israel diplomatically, fracture Western public support for democratic allies, and position the Soviet Union as a champion of oppressed peoples. It is important to be precise about what we know and what remains incomplete. Pacepa's testimony, while widely cited, represents one primary source, a senior defector with his own experiences, perspective, and interests. His accounts are corroborated by some documentary evidence and additional defector testimony, but like much intelligence history from this era, the complete picture is partially obscured by still classified records. What historians broadly agree on is this: Soviet bloc intelligence services engaged in systematic anti-Zionist propaganda throughout the Cold War. The KGB did coordinate influence operations targeting Western and Middle Eastern public opinion. The strategic logic Pacepa describes, using political language to launder and amplify disinformation, is consistent with documented Soviet methodology across multiple campaigns. How do historians evaluate the evidence for Operation SIG and related Soviet influence campaigns? The scholarly record draws on several categories of sources. First, declassified documents. Following the partial opening of Soviet archives after 1991 and ongoing declassification efforts by Western intelligence services, researchers have examined primary material previously unavailable. These documents have helped establish the broad contours of active measures campaigns, even where specific operational files remain classified. Second, defector testimony. Beyond Pachepa, a number of former Soviet and Eastern Bloc intelligence officers have provided accounts consistent with his broader narrative. Ladislav Bittman, former deputy head of the Czechoslovak Intelligence Service's Disinformation Department, documented Soviet forgery and propaganda operations extensively. Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB propaganda officer who defected in 1970, describes systematic active measures methodology in remarkable detail. Their accounts, taken together, reinforce a pattern of institutionalized disinformation. Third, scholarly analysis. Historians and researchers have examined the intersection of Soviet propaganda and the evolution of anti-Semitic rhetoric in international political discourse. Their work situates Operation SIG within a broader documented pattern of deliberate narrative construction. It is equally important to acknowledge the debates within this field. Not all historians agree on the precise scope or lasting impact of Operation SIG specifically. Some scholars caution against treating complex social and political phenomena as simple products of external manipulation. Sound historical thinking requires holding both the documented evidence and the legitimate scholarly debate simultaneously. What is not seriously disputed? The Soviet Union engaged in large-scale, professionally executed disinformation campaigns throughout the Cold War. The specific targeting of Jewish identity and Zionism as part of those campaigns is documented, and the mechanisms by which disinformation spreads, adapts, and outlives its origins are well established. Why does this history matter today? Disinformation campaigns do not work like conventional weapons. A bomb destroys its target, and the destruction is visible. A propaganda campaign plants ideas that can remain dormant for years or decades, resurfacing in new contexts, adopted by actors who may have no awareness of their origin. Scholars who study influence operations have identified a recurring pattern. Narratives introduced through coordinated disinformation can take on lives of their own. Once integrated into the discourse of genuine political movements, they become nearly impossible to trace back to their manufactured sources. This process, sometimes called narrative laundering, represents one of the most durable effects of a successful influence operation. Specific framings and rhetorical structures from Soviet Cold War propaganda have reappeared in international political discourse in ways that historians and media scholars continue to study and debate. Understanding where these narratives came from does not resolve every contemporary political question, but it gives us essential context, the kind that helps us ask better questions. Media literacy, the capacity to evaluate sources, question origins, and distinguish documented evidence from contested assertion, is a fundamental requirement of informed citizenship in any era. History is rarely simple. The Cold War was not a story of pure good against pure evil. It was a collision of competing powers, ideologies, and interests, played out across millions of lives. Operation SIG, and the broader active measures program of which it was a part, remind us that the contest for truth is not fought only with weapons or votes. It is fought in the narratives we accept, the sources we trust, and the questions we choose to ask. We encourage you to consult multiple sources, seek scholarly perspectives, and hold complexity with intellectual honesty. If you found this documentary valuable, subscribe to Roots and Resilience for more historical deep dives into Jewish history, geopolitics, and media literacy. Thank you for watching.